Keep the turn coming, guys.
Roger.
4-1, second set of fighters have dropped down.
The Air National Guard, considered by some the best air force in the world, about to engage in simulated combat over the western United States.
There's two of them. You got them? Yep, I got them. Okay, hang on.
One that he's at Joe.
Come on. Come on, airplane.
Okay, I got 7-2, has one doing a lag roll on me.
It's what I would call unfair to the people, the dedicated citizens who are dedicating their lives to our national security. We're asking them to do a job with less than satisfactory equipment.
Bottom line, if we have to go to war, our highly talented, highly experienced people going to die because their equipment can't make it.
No question about it, and what's more important, they won't be able to accomplish the mission.
That is Major General Francis Girard, a World War II ace and now Adjutant General of New Jersey. General Girard and other members of the Air National Guard are demanding better treatment from the Air Force. A list of bitter complaints was presented by the Air Guard in this report entitled Vista 1999. The Air Guard was once considered nothing more than a glorified flying club by members of the active Air Force. That is no longer the case. The Air Guard, though made up of civilians, is critical to the defense of the United States. Air Guard members fly between 30 and 35% of the Air Force's annual missions, and do so at only 9% of the Air Force operating budget. Military experts agree that the Air Force could not fulfill its responsibilities without the reserve force. Just how good are they? Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin says even the regular Air Force can't compare.
The Air National Guard is not the second best Air Force in the world, it is the best.
Even top brass in the Air Force admit the maintenance personnel and pilots in the Air Guard are generally more experienced and better qualified than members of the active Air Force. Major General Perry Smith, Chief of Air Force Planning.
Because the National Guard folks have great stability. The crew chiefs tend to have much more experience in the weapon system. They don't have the training problem and turnover problem we have in the active duty forces. So generally the Guard maintenance is as good, or in some cases even better, than the maintenance in the active duty force. As far as the crews are concerned, they also tend to be more experienced, more flying time, and more experience in the individual airplane they fly. So in many cases they are somewhat more qualified than the active duty force, which tends to be a younger force.
In 1973, the role of the reserve forces changed dramatically, and that's exactly why some high-level members of the Air Guard are complaining today. The change was the adoption of the so-called total force policy. It means in time of war or national emergency, the Air Guard must be ready to fight immediately. But are they ready?
These aircraft are F-4D Phantoms. They form the backbone of the Air Guard's fighter force. However, most are at least 15 years old and are rapidly becoming obsolete.
Experts agree that the performance of the F-4 suffers from an antiquated radar system and a smoke trail from its J-79 engines that can be seen by an enemy over 20 miles away. General Girard says if the Air Guard is supposed to be part of the total force, it should get the same treatment as the regular Air Force.
The Air Force and their plans, and from my reading of the 2000 report, it's going to be a long time before we see any F-15s in the Air Guard for air defense. We're going to be stuck with the F-4C, which is certainly not it might be better than the F-106 because of the obsolescence of the 106, but it's still not the answer. If we're going to do the mission, we deserve the F-15 along with the Air Force.
Senator Proxmire agrees. He says the Air Guard is the victim of discrimination.
The Guard is not getting the kind of equipment they need, and it's a crime. There shouldn't be a discrimination against the Guard simply because they're not regular, but there is.
The Air Force counters by saying the military budget can go just so far. Major General Smith dismisses complaints that the Air Force is passing on to the Guard aircraft that are borderline obsolete and in terrible disrepair.
We turn over airplanes to the National Guard. They are not a bunch of pieces of junk that the National Guard then has to rebuild. They do have some maintenance problems, and the Guard does take good care of those aircraft. But we're not giving the Guard a bunch of junk. That's not a correct statement.
But Air Guard maintenance technicians who work on the F-4s see things very differently.
When you get these airplanes from the Air Force, what kind of shape were they in?
Pretty poor. The Air Force is normally getting newer airplanes, mostly the F-15 and F-16. So when we get these, they're just trying to get rid of them. And as long as they normally fly out, that's all they're worried about. We get them, we end up tearing them apart. and getting them to where they can perform their mission.
We've done as much as pulled panels off of airplanes and found screws, things laying inside the panels. We've accepted airplanes that have flown in from regular Air Force bases with massive fuel leaks. We've accepted some with hydraulic leaks. We've accepted some with major cracks. And the list is really endless.
But aircraft aren't the only things about which Vista 1999 complains. Some types of air-to-air missiles are also criticized.
If you had to go to war in Europe, you wouldn't be able to use the same missiles that the Air Force has.
Correct.
Well, how can you fight the battle that way?
Well, this is some of the questions we have been asking. If we're going to be integrated into the force, how are we going to be used? What will be our capability?
And what are the answers you're getting?
It's always probably it's at the end of the 5-year plan, which never arrives.
While hoping for up-to-date equipment, the Air Guard continues training with what it has.
To enhance its combat readiness, the Air Guard even conducts its own realistic war games. This one is called Sentry Aspen Flag.
This reporter flew as an observer on the exercise with the Colorado Air Guard's 120th Tactical Fighter Squadron. The exercise involved a simulated dogfight.
Okay, there's he is up high. 7-3, 9 right, 9 right. There's 2 of them. You got them? Yep, I got them. Okay, hang on.
Dogfight over, the A-7 skimmed the ground en route to the bombing range.
Crew, you're clear to jump into combat trail.
Looking good.
The accuracy demonstrated in these exercises has enabled the Air Guard to defeat their Air Force counterparts in the most recent head-to-head flying competitions. Air Guard flying skill, however, has not been confined to contests. In 1968, Guard units were activated and went to Vietnam. Air Force historian Dr. Charles Gross.
They got there, and before long, each of those 4 squadrons, plus a 5th squadron that was basically composed of individual guardsmen who had volunteered or whatever for service in South Vietnam, they became the top F-100 squadrons in South Vietnam, surpassing even their active duty counterparts.
Then why, if the Guard is considered part of the total force and has a proven record of performance, does it get second-class treatment, as some argue? General Smith says budget constraints force the Air Force to make priorities.
And when the war breaks out, the first few days of the war are absolutely crucial in winning and losing the war. So the forces overseas have got to be the best. The F-15 wing at Bitburg, for instance, which I commanded in Germany, has the best F-15s in the world. They're better than the ones in the States. They're better than the ones in training because they would be the first ones into the fight.
Members of the Guard understand this, but General Girard says if there are budget constraints, the Air Force should take advantage of the enormous, well-trained resource that exists in the Air Guard, which he believes can handle any mission.
In order for this country to meet its economic conditions, we should go the most affordable way in providing our defense, and I think as long as we can get a capable force in the Guard and the Reserve, that's where the additional missions should go.
Whether or not the Vista reforms ever become reality now depends on upper-level defense planners in the Reagan administration and the mood of Congress. From McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, this is Chuck Caro, CNN, on Special Assignment.